Good morning, and thank you for tuning in. So, I've been thinking a lot about this week, about this reality that at any given point in our lives, we have something that is right in front of us. And so, like, for example, who remembers back to when they were in grade school? And you're thinking in terms of how you have right in front of you 12 years of school that you have to get through. So elementary school, middle school, high school. And as a child, you're thinking about how that seems like it's going to take forever. 12 years of school right in front of you, it's very daunting, it's very overwhelming. And yet, it goes by in the blink of an eye. It's not in front of us anymore. It's in the rearview mirror. But do you remember that feeling of having that right in front of you, being something that you knew you were going to have to deal with, to approach, to get through? I want to take that idea of having something in front of us, and I want to ask you this morning, and I want you to think about this. What is in front of you right now? In your life, in the stage of life that you're at, what is right in front of you? Or what are you maybe in the midst of or in the thick of at this moment? Me personally, I have 3 kids, ages 6, 9, and 11. And I still have their childhood in front of me. And so Yasmin and I are very much kind of in this mode, this perspective of primarily thinking about how we can feed, clothe, and educate, and most importantly, pass our faith on to our children. Because we know that we only have, theoretically, 18 years with them before they can make that decision on whether or not they want to stick around for a little while, or fly the coop, leave the nest, go off on their own. And so that's what's in front of Yasmin and I. That's what I think a lot about, I pray a lot about, something that I focus a lot on. But what's right in front of you? I know that you're probably maybe not in the same stage of life as I am, but you are in a season of life. And so there's something in every season of life that is in front of you. And I want to ask you, what is it for you? And how are you dealing with that? How are you approaching that? How are you going to enter into that? Or maybe if you're already in the midst of it, how are things going? I'm thinking a lot about our congregation, and there's a lot of older people in this church. And I know that for some of you, it's probably aging. Aging is the thing that is right in front of you. You are kind of watching yourself age. You're feeling age take its toll. Your body isn't working as well as it used to. Maybe you're having some new health issues that you're dealing with. And the reality is that you're coming up on the last couple of decades of your life. And that reality is starting to sink in. And it's right in front of you. And so the kind of the haunting question that you might be asking is, how will I spend, the last 2 decades, last quarter of my life? Maybe that's a question that you feel pressured to answer. How will you deal with what's right in front of you? And if we're not sure how to answer that question, if we're looking at whether it's grade school or having children, raising kids, or maybe it's going to college or getting a job or getting married, or maybe it's retirement or our last couple of decades of life, if we don't know how to answer that question, then we're in trouble. Because there's usually, there's typically 2 ways to deal with what's right in front of you. With faith or with fear. You can approach it, deal with it, enter into it with God or without God. And if we don't know how to answer that question, how are we going to deal with what's right in front of us? Then we're more more prone to enter into it with fear. afraid, anxious, worried about what might happen. If we're not doing it with God, then we're doing it alone. And we know that doing it alone is difficult. It's hard. It's lonely. And so what I want us to do is spend a couple of weeks in the book of Joshua, where the whole idea of dealing with what's right in front of us is fleshed out, I think, very well in the story of Israel entering the promised land. And so if you would turn to Joshua chapter 1, that's where we're going to be this morning. And just as a kind of a reminder of the background of the book of Joshua, it comes right after the end of the Mosaic law. And so you have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the 5 books of the law, the Pentateuch. Joshua comes right after that. And that's very much the story of Abraham and of Moses and the role that they play in something that God has promised the world. And so if you think back to Genesis, things go terribly wrong in the garden at the fall of man. Both Adam and Eve sin and are banished from the garden. And from that point on, humanity is destined to live a life in conflict with each other, in conflict with God, in conflict with Satan. And the world becomes a darker place because of that. But God isn't going to give up on his creation. He's not going to give up on humanity. He has a plan of redemption for the world, a very exciting plan. And it begins with a promise in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, where to the serpent, God says to Satan, about mankind, you will bite his heel, but he will crush your head. We should probably just read it, that way I don't butcher what it actually says. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, God is speaking to the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. And so Satan is going to, and this is a reference to a savior, a Messiah, someone who would crush the head of Satan. And the reference to striking his heel is, of course, this idea that Jesus would be temporarily wounded. He died on the cross and was dead for 3 days, but on the third day he was raised again, and this crushes Satan's head. This is what defeats Satan. And so that's a promise that God makes back in Genesis. And then you skip forward a little bit to Genesis chapter 12. God promises Abraham that he would be the father of a nation, and that he would bless all the nations through Abraham. And so that happens during Genesis. We see the creation of the people of Israel, but then we also see how they are sold into slavery, how they spend this time in bondage in Egypt, and God continues to promise that he will rescue them, that he will bring them out of that place and into a promised land. And so the book of Joshua picks up just shortly after Moses, on the threshold of the promised land, has died. And so the people of Israel are preparing to enter the land. And so let's start reading in Joshua chapter 1. Let's read verses 1 through 6. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land that I am about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. And so you've got this scene where God chooses Joshua to replace Moses as the leader of God's people. Now, Moses wasn't allowed to enter into the promised land. And so Joshua becomes this Mosaic leader, this person that God has chosen to lead his people. And they are on the threshold of the promised land. And so talking about things that are right in front of us, right in front of Joshua, right in front of God's people, is this land that God has promised to them. Now they have to figure out how they're going to deal with what's right in front of them. How are they going to enter into the land? How are they going to approach this conquest? How are they going to successfully take control of the land that God has given to them? And it starts out with God reminding Joshua of promises that he has made to the people and to Moses. And so that's very much kind of the idea here, is that God is going to keep his promises. And if we can trace that all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, we know that God is going to keep his promise to crush Satan's head, somehow reverse the curse that has entered into the world and affected humanity because of sin. And so God is reminding Joshua and reminding us that he is actively doing things to make life better for all of mankind. And Joshua is going to play a role in that as a leader of God's people. And so thinking about God telling Joshua, okay, here's the promised land, and you're going to be the one to lead my people into this place. What's it going to take for Joshua to do this? What's it going to take for Joshua to be able to deal with what's right in front of him? And God tells him here. God says, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. You're going to need God's presence if you want to be able to approach this and deal with this the right way, successfully. You're going to need God's presence. I am going to be with you as I was with Moses, God's presence. God tells him, be strong. You're not going to be able to enter into the promised land if you are weak. If you are, if you aren't strong. You're going to need strength to be able to deal with what's right in front of you. He says, be strong and courageous. You can't be scared. You can't be afraid. You have to have courage if you're going to deal with what's right in front of you. And the implication, too, is that you're going to need faith. Because if God tells you that he's with you, but you don't believe him, if God tells you to be strong, but you don't believe that he can give you strength, if God tells you to be courageous, but you don't believe that you can get your courage from him, then you're not going to be able to do this, I think is what God is saying. And so the implication is, God says you're going to need his presence, you're going to need his strength, you're going to need his courage, and you're going to need faith to believe that he can give you all of those things. And so I want you to return to you and what you're on the threshold of, or maybe what you're dealing with right now, maybe what you're in the thick of right now, whether it's a health thing or a relationship thing, or just another one of those life things, be it raising children, trying to influence your grandchildren, about to get married after 50 years of marriage, retirement, or just your last couple of years of life. What's it going to take for you to deal with what's right in front of you successfully, in a way that pleases God and glorifies God and is good for you? Let me ask you this. Do you believe that God is with you? God told Joshua, as I was with Moses, I will be with you. Do you believe that God is with you? That whatever you're going into, God is right there alongside of you. He doesn't want you to feel like you're alone or think that you're alone, because he is with you. Do you believe that? Do you believe that God is a source of strength for you to deal with that? That he can provide you with mental and emotional strength and spiritual strength to deal with whatever it is that's on the horizon? What about courage? Do you believe that God, in His love and in His mercy and in His power, can cast out all fear so that you can deal with what's right in front of you with courage? That's what I want us to be able to grab a hold of in the book of Joshua. That's what I want us to be able to embrace, so that whatever it is that we're dealing with, we can say, well, I got this because God is with me, because He is my source of strength, He is my source of courage, and I have the faith to believe that I am going to get through this. And really, what's the alternative? If you're looking at aging, or looking at raising children, or looking at your marriage, or looking at your job, and you don't believe that God is with you, and you don't find your strength in Him, and you don't have courage that comes from Him, and you don't believe in the things that He tells you, what is the alternative? How are you going to deal with that? Well, you're going to have to deal with it alone. You're going to have to deal with it in a worldly way, which means you're going to have to learn how to figure it out. You're going to have to tough it out. You're going to have to white knuckle it. And that's a lot of pressure. That is a lot of burden and weight. If you think that it's your responsibility and it's up to you to figure your life out, that's hard. That's hard to do. You're also going to deal with it. If you're not dealing with it with strength that comes from God, then you're going to be trying to deal with it with your own strength. And our own strength is really not that remarkable. We can be strong for a little while, but our strength only takes us so far. The alternative to dealing with what's in front of us with courage is to deal with it with cowardice. I'm afraid. I don't know what to do. This is a lot. How am I going to deal with this? I don't have what it takes. And fear begins to set in. And let's just be honest, a lot of people are living their lives trying to do it on their own, very aware of their weaknesses, very, very afraid, very cowardly. And that's not how we were meant to live our lives. God didn't want us to live that way. And so there's a lot to be found in the book of Joshua that can help us with whatever it is that we're on the threshold of, if we would just be willing to listen to God and obey. Let's start reading in verse 7. God continues to tell Joshua, be strong and very courageous. I hope you don't get tired of hearing that, because you're going to hear it a lot. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the left or to the right, that you may be successful wherever you go. And so God is dropping hints here. Do you want to know that I am with you? Do you want to find your strength and your courage in me? Do you want to grow in your faith? And then he starts dropping these hints. It's gonna require you to be rooted in my word. He says, be careful to obey all the law that my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from the right or to the left, that you may be successful in wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And so maybe you are looking at what's right in front of you and you're saying, I know that I need God's presence to be able to deal with this. I know that I need to find strength and courage and faith in Him, but how do I get there? How do I know that God is with me? How do I find my strength in Him? How do I allow Him to build courage up in my heart? How do I grow in my faith? And God has told Joshua, you need to be rooted in the Word. You need to have my words on your lips at all times. He says to meditate on it day and night. And so all of these things that we know that we need in order to get through whatever it is that's right in front of us in life are going to be given to us through the Word of God. 2 Timothy 3, 16 and 17. Everybody knows these verses, but I just want to remind you of them. Says that all Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, for rebuking, for correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. There is a good work in school. There's a good work in your job. There's a good work in raising kids. There's a good work in the marital relationship. There is a good work in retirement. There is a good work even in your last quarter of your life. The question is, will you allow God's breath through His inspired Word to teach you, to train you, to rebuke you, to correct you, and to equip you to enter into that? Psalm 119, 105 simply says, your word is a lamp for my feet and a light on my path. If whatever's in front of you looks dark, if it looks like it's hard to get through, the Joshua is going to send spies into the land of Canaan, into the promised land. And some of those spies are going to say, oh, this is so scary. The people there are like 20 feet tall and they're huge, they're strong. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they're kind of scared because what they see is something that is extremely difficult for them to imagine themselves getting through. But Psalm 119, 105 says that your word is a lamp for my feet and a light on my path. If whatever's in front of you looks dark, then you need to take God's word and let it sit in your heart. Meditate on that. And that becomes a lamp for your feet and a light on your path so that you can get through whatever it is that's right in front of you. And so in verses 10 through 18, it says, Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. So let's do this. We're going to, he's telling people, all right, God has told me the way that we're going to approach this next thing, what's right in front of us. So get ready. Let's do this. And in verse 12 he says, to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you after he said, the Lord your God will give you rest by giving you this land. Your wives, your children, and your livestock may stay in the land that Moses gave you east of the Jordan. But all your fighting men ready for battle must cross over ahead of your fellow Israelites. You are to help them until the Lord gives them rest, as he has done for you, and until they too have taken possession of the land the Lord your God is giving them. After that, then you may go back and occupy your own land, which Moses the servant of the Lord gave you, east of the Jordan, toward the sunrise. And so there were some tribes that had asked Moses for land that was east of the Jordan before they got into the promised land. And God allowed them to have that with the condition that the fighting men would go and help the rest of the tribes secure the promised land. And so this is what Joshua is telling them. You have to hold to your promise to God and to your brothers in the other tribes. And so they answered in verse 16, they answered Joshua, whatever you have commanded us, we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will fully obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your word and does not obey it, whatever you may command them, will be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. And so that's kind of the thing that's being echoed back and forth here. Be strong and courageous. God tells them, be strong and courageous. They tell each other, be strong and courageous. I want to tell you this morning, whatever's right in front of you, be strong and courageous. Because God is with you. He wants to be your source of strength. He wants to be the source of your courage. And he wants you to grow in your faith so that whatever it is that's in front of you, you can approach it and enter into it and deal with it in a way that glorifies Him and is good for you. So are you ready? Be strong and courageous. Blessings.